and monitoring. This is a 5-day program where we will be meeting every day from 2:30 to around 5 p.m. to discuss about different aspects of nutrition and how you can integrate these nutrition goals in village planning and how you can monitor these nutrition indicators. In the process, we will also talk about the recent challenges that have emerged due to the pandemic and subsequent lockdown. And by the end of the program, we will try to incorporate your understanding and what you understand and what kind of challenges you are facing from nutrition programs. So before I start with the formal sessions, uh, I would quickly show you the session plan that we have prepared so you understand how the session will progress over the 5 days. I'm going to open the session plan here and leave it out for a few minutes for you to read, and then I'll start speaking in. So I hope you have gone through it cursory on a cursory note. Let me just quickly also take you through. So today we will be discussing the basics of nutrition security discourse, followed by a session by Dr. Vanishri on achieving nutrition through GPDP, where she'll speak about Gram Panchayat Development Plan. Tomorrow we will be talking about the nutrition status of Indians. We have an eminent speaker, Dr. Veena Shatrugna, who will be talking about the likely impact of COVID-19 pandemic on nutrition status. Then we have a session on concept of gender and its link to nutrition. We shall be speaking about gender today as well, but tomorrow we will be taking it into detail of what gender is and how it is constructed and what are the pathways through which it's linked to nutrition. The next day, we will be talking about food systems for nutrition and value chains. Dr. Surjit Vikraman will be taking a session on that, followed by Ms. Y. Salomi, who has worked with Deccan Development Society. She will be talking about village planning and monitoring for nutrition sensitive agriculture and women empowerment. On the last day of the technical sessions, we have an executive from technical expert from FAO, Robin Devados. He will be talking about tools for integrating nutrition in village plan, and he will be teaching you how to do situation analysis and how to prepare an action plan. This will be a complete technical session where you will learn these two things, situation analysis and action plan. On the last day, we have a session from Dr. Partha Sahu on labor and livelihood linkages to nutrition, followed by our feedback and evaluation form. Now, before the program and the sessions begin, there are a few things that I request all the participants to follow. First of all, do not unmute yourself under any circumstances because the program session is being recorded. This same recording will be provided to you. It will be made available to you. If you unmute yourself and start talking or start taking phone calls, it will get recorded in that same recording and will be there in the as a disturbance. So if you want a disturbance-free content, a full recording, please do not unmute yourself. If there is a scope of question and answer, we shall prompt you, we shall invite you to ask the questions. When we invite, you use the raise hand option and you raise your hand and we will unmute and we will take the questions. And if there is any kind of technical difficulty in joining the session, you cannot hear the audio or there is other problems that you are facing, those kinds of doubts, please raise it in the WhatsApp group. And the WhatsApp group is for technical problems only. The session related discussion, we will prompt you to talk when there is a time and a scope. At the same time, just know that this program demands all 5-day attendance. You have to attend all the 5 days of the program to be certified. So please, in the program, we shall share some polls and some quizzes. Those quizzes and polls are also to ensure that you from your end are attending the program. These polls and quizzes will be there for a window of time. They will not be open throughout the program. So when the quizzes are shared, please attend the quizzes and put your answers because these are the only way we can ensure attendance. There is no other formal attendance mechanism. So with this, I will just take you through the first introductory session. Um, other doubts relating to the programs, we shall take it up as the program progresses. Is the PPT visible, Praveen?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Okay. Okay. You have started the recording, right?
Yes, ma'am, I started.
Okay. Okay. So, because it's a very big program and there are more than 200 people, a one-to-one introduction at this point will not be possible. So we are going to skip that and go straightly to the session. But as our invited guest speakers join, for their benefit, we shall have a detailed interactive session where we will invite you to unmute yourself and speak. But other than that, by and large in the program, do not unmute yourself, and also please do not start the video because that will be captured in the recording. So to start with the basics of the program, we know that the program is about nutrition, and there are some technical aspects of nutrition which are dealt with by medical professionals. But as social scientists, our problem is the implementation side of it. What are the challenges to achieving those nutrition outcomes, and what are the parameters that we can work on? What are the parameters that we can monitor? We need to understand those aspects. To start with, let's look at the background where we are standing, why we are discussing nutrition today. We know that our country is 102nd among 119 in something called a global hunger index. Now, WHO, which is the World Health Organization, it reported that more than 1 in 3 in India's under 5 children are underweight. That is, their weight to height ratio is less than what is desired. 2 in 5 are stunted, that is, they have low height for age, and 1 in 5 are worsted, that is low weight for height, and close to 1 in 10 children are actually malnourished. Now, this situation is very unusual in a country which has so far has a stable democracy, where we did not have a major famine after 1942, and our food production system is more or less similar, and our aggregate consumption over time has increased. It has not gone down. So for a country like this kind of a scenario is very unusual. So going forward, let's see in the sustainable development goal, this nutrition goal fits in the second development goal, which is zero hunger, achieving zero hunger. So the goal is to end hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. So in this scenario also you see that there are many challenges that South Asia as a whole, these are also the countries, India and other countries of South Asia are also the countries which have a colonial past. So we have had a colonial past, a very disturbed history, and then we have achieved democracy, we have achieved a government, a proper governance. So our situation worldwide is very poor compared to the developed countries. But even within these developing countries, India is unique because we have been growing in all the other parameters. Our aggregate consumption has increased over time until, of course, the COVID pandemic when there was a very big crisis. Our aggregate income has increased over time. Our asset accumulation has increased over time. We have had fairly stable parameter in everything. Education has gone up, but in nutrition, we are just not able to reach where we want to reach. Somehow the nutrition parameters just refuse to budge. So we see that 3 in 10 stunted children in the world are Indian, and 53% of women between 15 to 49 years are anemic, which is almost second woman. Every second woman you will meet in that age group will be anemic. We have over 80% of infant and young children who do not get minimum dietary diversity. So at least 4 or 5 food groups a day is required for the human body to maintain the nutrition balance. And over 80% of our infants and young children do not get that kind of a dietary diversity. Our food production is not bad. About 50% of our total workforce is employed in the agricultural sector. And if global food price doubles, India will lose up to 49 billion in US dollar GDP. So we see that food production is very important for India, and yet our hunger indicators, indicators related to nutrition are not where we want it to be. Moving forward, so in terms of nutrition, there is a database called National Family Health Survey. Of course, in the last day of the technical program, we will show you where you can find this database and how you can download your district reports and all. But to take you through the scenario, So between 2005-6 and 2015-16, the two rounds of National Family Health Survey, we see that percentage of women with low body mass index, that is your height weight ratio, is reduced by 12 points. So there has been some improvement in women who have low body mass index. But for men, this reduction is higher, which is by 14 points. Therefore, the gender gap in body mass index increased over time. We also see that anemia decline was higher for women and the gender gap reduced. But anemia in women, if you see, that is the third set of bars. The blue bar means 2005-6, the orange bar means 2015-16. The proportion of anemic women, 55.3 and 53%, the proportion of anemic women is almost double that of anemic men. So women are very high in terms of anemia. Women's representation in overall anemia in India is very, very high. So we were talking about the global hunger index scores, and I'll just show you these two figures. The left hand side figure, the red side is the global hunger index score, the bottom 25 countries. The green side, the right hand side is top 25 countries. And if you see that our country, that is India, is figures in the red side, that is the bottom 25 countries. And if you just quickly look at the countries that are in the neighborhood of our country, I'll just try to take the cursor at India. Here is India. So if you just see the countries which are at the neighborhood of India, you will see these are countries which have had an extremely violent present. They have had civil wars, they have had famines after famines, there have been other kinds of crises. Niger, Angola, Guinea-Bissau, Rwanda, these countries have history of violence and unstable government and extreme poverty and extreme kind of food-related crisis. And these countries come in the last 25 countries. But India is the only country which has a very stable democracy, which has had has not had a major famine or any kind of major war within its boundaries for even after 1947. But India is also a country that comes in these last 25 countries. On the other hand, if you see the top 25 countries, it is mostly the countries of Southern America, where these countries are Belarus, Bosnia, Herzegovina. So these are the countries which have come in the top 25 countries. So there is something that we're not able to capture when it comes to nutrition. So we have spent a lot of funding, there are a lot of programs, but somehow in nutrition we are not able to capture what needs to be captured. That's why our other development parameters and the parameters of nutrition fail to merge or fail to match. Going forward, other than NFHs, there is another data set, which is the CNNS data set of malnourishment. I am not going to spend much time here in this slide because it's a very technical slide and we will talk about databases on the last day again. So we have seen that these different databases of nutrition have basically diverged. They don't converge with each other. So there are some concerns on the quality of data in nutrition as well. So whenever we are collecting any data on nutrition, it's better to go with a large sample survey like NFHs. And if we are taking CNNS data, we have to look very cautiously as to at what point of time the data was collected, whether the sample size is enough or not, because the database largely diverges. So we were talking about the policy environment for nutrition. So if you see in India, India is the only country among all the South Asian countries which has an intervention for every area of nutrition. You name a problem and we have a program for it. We have iron folate supplements, we have calcium supplements, we have anthelmintic treatment, we have energy and protein dietary supplements, we have a broad base of assessment of anemia. There is a huge infrastructure for that. We have counseling, energy and protein intake and foods rich in macronutrients, counseling programs. We have counselings to adherence to eminent supplements. So there is a intervention in almost all the areas of maternal nutrition in South Asian countries. Yet our outcomes don't catch up with the other indicators of development. So one of the reason that is thought about why these things fail to catch up is because one of the reasons that experts talk about is because we fail to capture the intra-household complexities in accessing food and nutrition when we talk about nutrition. So on top of it, we have programs and policies that target women, that target households, but inside the household, what is happening that we fail to capture through a policy or even through education. So gender becomes a very important part in deciding how our nutrition indicators will be visible in some time. So we have seen that the incidence of malnourishment is abysmally higher in Indian women. So every second woman in the reproductive age group in India are anemic. We see that NFHS 3 to NFHS 4, the gender gap has remained almost stagnant, with percentage of malnourished women being more than malnourished men. If you follow the newspaper, if you follow the reports, you will see that almost all the starvation deaths that are reported in recent times, they are either abandoned women, widows, or adolescent girls. So women are often get last and least to it, even within families. There are evidence of that, and the dietary diversity to which women have access to is usually low. Girl child are more likely to be thin and more prone to stunting. Mother's education, income, and geography have a strong influence of stunting figures. And gender inequalities exist among the entire food production chain from farm to plate. So women's access to production, access to value addition, access to consumption, all this entire chain there is a gender gap and which impedes the attainment of food and nutrition security. So one reason which possibly might explain this mismatch between nutrition goals and all the other goals is possibly because we fail to see gender or the intra-household complexities in achievement of these goals. Women also have an influence in overall nutritional outcome. So gender difference in nutritional security is influenced by women in three major dimensions. One is as a producer of food. 33% of cultivators, that is one third of cultivators, and about half of the agricultural laborers, around 47% of agricultural laborers in India are women. Women also influence as consumer of food. We know that hunger is gendered. If you see this graph that we have shown on the right hand side, this is a graph of chronic hunger between men and women. The orange part signifies men and the blue part signifies women. So if you see the chronically hungry people, the first bar, we see 60% of women take this proportion and 40% of men go chronically hungry. That is, they don't have even one meal to eat a day for a long period of time. In agricultural South Asian countries, this is even worse. This ratio is even worse. Out of all the chronically hungry people, 70% are women and only 30% are men. In the sub-Saharan African countries, which are poorer than South Asia and which also have a history of violence and there is turbulence in their politics, in those countries it's almost like the global average, which is 60 and 40%. In the West Asian countries, it's women almost don't figure in this whole chronic hunger body. It's only men who are chronically hungry. Only 5% women report that they're chronically hungry. And in the sub-Saharan African landholder countries, 15% of women come in chronically hungry. So one of the major factor that we see is that, so when we say landholder, which means in these countries, women have land in their own name. So women's access to agriculture seem to have an influence on whether they will go chronically hungry or not. So in the countries or in the parts of geography where women have access to landholding, their share in the chronically hungry people you see goes down substantively. So in the parts which can do agriculture but women don't have land, you see in sub-Saharan Africa 60% of chronically hungry people are women. But in the same sub-Saharan Africa where women hold land, only 15% of chronically hungry people are women. So having access to land for women is extremely important for them to not go chronically hungry. So moving forward, the pathways. There are several pathways through which women, we were talking about the pathways through which women influence nutrition. So first is if other than agriculture and as a consumer, women are also caregivers and they influence nutrition outcome through nutrition of children. So having low BMI is one way that women can influence malnutrition. So in India, we know that almost 20% children were observed to be born with low birth weight, and the major predictors were mother's BMI being less than 18.5. So short stature of mother and the lack of antenatal care are one of the reasons why their BMI can be low. But having low BMI of the mother means the child is likely to be born with low birth weight. The other thing is number of pregnancies. Short pregnancy interval and multiple pregnancies have been observed to create adverse nutritional outcome in women. So if you have repeated pregnancies, if you're married early and you have continuously pregnant, so that creates adverse nutritional outcome in women and also in the children that are born. Age at marriage and age at first pregnancy, that is also very important. If you are married very young and your first pregnancy happens very young, then the child is likely to be malnourished. Also, lack of knowledge about child care, caregiving practices, negligence and ignorance on the part of the mother and other caregivers might result in inadequate nutrition and bad health among children. And there are a lot of taboos on breastfeeding. There are taboos about knowledge of nutrition which create adverse result of nutrition among children. Moving forward, we are talking about gender equality and food security here. So we think that gender is one aspect of nutrition that we fail to see, and resultantly this nutrition adverse outcome is created. And I'm not going to go into detail of this card because the PPT will be shared. You can see the numbers. But we have agricultural gender gaps that we know, and gender inequalities in the access to rural resources, services, and labor market opportunities create these agriculture gender gaps. There is also a huge undervaluation of women's roles and contributions. In many places, women's labor goes invisible because it's counted under domestic work and under household work. The moment it's unpaid and done in their own farm, it goes uncounted. So there is undervaluation of women's roles and contribution, and policies that are supposed to be targeting nutrition or supposed to be targeting food security often are gender neutral. So it does not see these undervaluation, this invisibility, these underlying injustices that happen. So miss out on the nutrition gaps. And if you just look at the nutrition policies carefully, most of them are palliative in nature. So they are curative in nature. They try to address nutrition after the malnutrition has happened. So they don't go into the root of this first gap in the to start with. So these are some of the reasons why we possibly lose out on the nutrition goals while keeping any other goal stable. So if you look at nutrition as a life cycle approach, so this is to understand what are the institutions and what are the kind of care needed at different stages of life. If you look at it, we start with maybe the adolescent girls who are 11 to 19-year-old, and this is the time where the continuum of care begins. So a healthy and adolescent girl becomes a healthy mother. So that's why we start with the adolescent girls. So they need to be enrolled in school for 11 to 19 years. So the kind of care and the kind of services that should be given to this age group. First is enrollment. There should be quarterly growth monitoring of them, whether they're getting proper nutrition, they're growing properly. If not, there should be supplementary nutrition, proper menstrual hygiene and management, and school awareness. Going forward to the antenatal conception and birth, so promoting safe motherhood and healthy birth of the child is the next stage. So at least 4 ANC visits, having proper IFR and CA, immunization and birth preparedness so that no bleeding or any kind of complications occur. Third stage is the postnatal stage. So we need to have institutional delivery, proper PNC visits, breastfeeding, immunization, newborn care, injections to avert any kind of maternal or neonatal complications. The fourth stage comes with the child. So that's first 1000 days after the birth. This is a very crucial stage for the child. If you lose out the first 1000 days of birth, if you don't give proper nutrition in this stage, the child will not be able to catch up afterwards with any kind of feed or supplement anywhere. So the first 1000 days is also the time when most of the brain development occurs, and after that there is not much brain development. So this is the stage from 0 to 3 years of age when most of the nutrition and supplementation and immunization needs to happen. So prevention of child malnutrition and ensuring proper immunization is important in this stage. Monthly growth monitoring is needed. Nutritive management of severely acute children, medium acute malnourished children. There should be CMTC linkage. There should be look, ask and listen approach. So you have to see the child, you have to ask the problems and listen to the problems if it's there. GMCD should be available, should be connected with GMCD, and there should be promotional visits to ensure that the mother and the guardians are taking care of the child. Lastly, we end with the preschool years, which is 3 to 6 years. So here the holistic development of a child's social, emotional, cognitive and physical needs is needed. So grade assessment, curriculum development, teacher training, infrastructure support and supplementary nutrition are needed at this stage. So there is a whole cycle that we have to take care of to target nutrition. It's not just we have some acute malnourished children and we give tablets and some feed and it's done. That's not how it's going to happen. So we have to understand this complex dimensions of nutrition through which we can where different institutions will come into being and different institutions will have to work together. Talking about institutions, now which are the institutions that will be responsible to give those services? So this is an MORD's chart where they have chalked out what kind of institutions should come into play in what kind of stage. So in the pregnancy stage, that is before birth, the women can go to Anganwadi. Anganwadi is supposed to provide them nutrition and immunization and all the care. And in the first 1,000 days also, Anganwadi has to take care of it in terms of nutrition. In 3 to 6 years as well, and 3 to 6 years, that is before preschool, Anganwadi will take care of the nutrition part. In 6 to 14 years, they'll enter school and midday meal through midday meal and other school feeding programs. Education department will take care of the nutrition of these people. Adolescents also are taken care of under the ambit of Anganwadi, but adolescents and 6 to 14 years, there is some overlap. So 6 to 14 years can be taken care of by the education department. In terms of health, immunization, the auxiliary nurse and midwife, that is ANM and ASHA, will take care of the immunization part up to 6 years. And 6 to 14 years, the local PHC, the public health center, will the primary health center will look at it. Delivery is only for the before birth section, so the auxiliary nurse and midwife is supposed to take care of it. General health will be taken care of by the primary health center in the village. Health awareness will be done by Anganwadi through frontline worker system. And in the 6 to 14 years, that is once they are in the school, the primary health center will create health awareness. Safe water and safe sanitation comes under the PRI institutions. The Gram Panchayat should coordinate with PHE. Gram Panchayat should coordinate with Block Panchayat and Zilla Parishad as well for sanitation issues. So moving forward to the determinants of child malnourishment. We have talked about the institutions, we have talked about the different arms of malnourishment and how gender comes into play. We will discuss gender in detail tomorrow. But talking about child malnourishment, this is an UNICEF construct of what are the different levels of determinant. So UNICEF has divided the entire arena of determinants into 3 basic layers. First is the immediate determinants, which are the immediate factors or causes responsible for malnourishment. So these can be related to food or nutrition intake, and these can be related to health situation. So if there is starvation, hunger, or access to there is no access to high protein or high nutrient diet, then there will be malnourishment. And if there is a disease or morbidity, then there will be malnourishment. So these are immediate causes why the child might become malnourished. Now, underlying these immediate causes, there are some other factors that come into play. The reason why there can be a starvation, there can be hunger, the reason why there can be disease and morbidity, there are some factors working underneath. So these are called the underlying factors or underlying determinants. So these can be regarding access to food. So there can be some kind of policy failure or welfare net failure to hinder access to food. There might be inefficiencies in the public distribution system. The ICDS system can be closed up. For example, now because of the COVID-19 pandemic, ICDS across the countries are closed, and that has created a new kind of problem of hunger because the women and children who were dependent on ICDS for supplementation and feed, now they are not able to access it. So there can be an access related problem. There can be maternal and child care related problem. The mother's inaccess, the mother's inability to take care of the child, which creates further problems in low nutrition diet and which might also create disease among the child. And also there can be water, sanitation and health service failures, which might create health related problems and subsequently child malnourishment. Now, underlying these underlying causes, there are some larger causes, larger institutional and policy level factors, which are clubbed under basic determinants of nutrition. So these can be environment, technology, and people related problems. The overall economic structure might not be conducive for a better access to food or childcare scenarios or health scenarios. There can be political and ideological frameworks. There might be lack of political will. There can be institutional failures as well. So as these problems create malnourishment, solution to these problems are having conducive situation of institutions, having conducive political ideological frameworks, having a better economic structure, having proper environment, technology and people might also create environment conducive for child nutrition as well. So the problems itself become solutions when flipped over. So if you look at it closely, give you some examples. In the immediate factors, there can be inadequate dietary intake. That can be one of the monitoring indicators. So if you are working at the grassroots level, you want to capture some of the indicators through which you can monitor what are the scenarios. You can look at the dietary intake, either quantity, or we shall teach you what is a dietary diversity index. So either quantity or quality can be taken in terms of dietary intake. And morbidity, that is reported disease in the village, can be another immediate factor. In the underlying factors, you can have household food insecurity. There are several indicators that you can go for. Access to PDS is most of the basic indicator. How much food grain the household itself produces, whether it has access to its own produced food grain, is another indicator. Overall, how much quantity of food it is able to buy, how much proportion of its expenditure goes into buying food, that is another indicator. So yes, household food insecurity is one of the factors. There can be inadequate feeding and caring practices. The mother might not have knowledge about feeding caring practices. There can be unhealthy household environment. It might not have a toilet in the premise. It might not have water in the premise. So the household might not have conducive environment for proper nutrition. So even if there is enough food, even if there is enough quality of food, it might still report undernourishment because of unhealthy environment. And we have inadequate health services. The primary health center might not be equipped to deal with immunization and nutrition care. The basic factors are largest of these all. They are beyond our scope, but these create the environment in which these underlying factors work. So households' access to land, education, employment and income, technology, and inadequate human physical and social capital. These are basic factors. Larger policy decides it, and then they work on the underlying policies. And socio-political environment, of course. So there are some interventions that can mitigate malnourishment. These interventions again can be divided into nutrition specific interventions that directly work on the clientele, that is your mother and child whom you want to bring out of malnutrition. And they can be nutrition sensitive indicators which are more preventive in nature, which work on the household and individual. So nutrition specific interventions are more in number. All the nutrition programs that we know of are mostly specific programs because they are curative in nature. They are curative because the malnutrition is already there, and it's like you have a disease and you have been given a medicine. So there is a specific form of malnutrition, and the specific intervention gives a kind of care for that particular malnutrition. But nutrition sensitive interventions work on more basic underlying structures. They work on the underlying factors and they are more preventive in nature. So they stop malnutrition from happening in the first place by curing the environmental or ecological problems. So to look at the specific indicators, we have Janani Suraksha Yojana, which ensures that the delivery is in an institution, provision of mother and child card, 4 or more antenatal care checkups, iron supplementation. We have take-home ration provision during pregnancy and breastfeeding when the mother cannot come to the Anganwadi. Yeah, institutional delivery is also through JSY, and health worker visit within 2 days of delivery. For child, we have weight and height measurement. We have this growth monitoring chart. We have vitamin A, iron and deworming programs. There is also supplementation programs. In nutrition sensitive interventions, we have ration card to ensure that the household gets food. We have Narega card, which ensures that the household has some cash, some job. So through income pathway, they can access nutrition. There are programs for improved toilet facility, clean drinking water, and in individual level, we have awareness programs, for example, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. We have self-help group membership, which provides linkages with loan and then through that livelihood. So you see the sensitive programs are more basic in nature. They kind of try to cure the underlying problems. They try to cure poverty or the environmental issues, lack of access to toilet, and the specific programs work directly on the form of malnutrition. So although we have this huge set of interventions and these institutions working, there are still some challenges to these interventions. To quickly look into these challenges that we have, for example, we have integrated child development scheme. ICDS is a very old scheme and has been working with lot of funding and its subsets for a long time, and it's the largest scheme that has in all over the world that has provided feed and cure to children at this level. But with that, we have problems because we have low and irregular payments to women frontline workers. These Anganwadi workers or frontline workers are not even considered as workers. They are given honorarium, not salary. So that creates some kind of problem in their welfare and their motivation to join the program. There are reports that many frontline workers are overworked and there is lack of motivation in that. Frontline workers, the training that these frontline workers have to access at block level or be above, there is no TADA provided to these workers. They have to go and attend the training on their own. In the primary health centers, there is lack of funds and supplies at times. There is also lack of awareness in the women in community to avail the services. So which service to be availed and whether it needs to be done, there is a lack of awareness. There is also reports of gender discrimination in availing the benefits in children under 6 years. So in India, we have this huge preference for boy child. So when it comes to providing more than basic minimum, there is gender discrimination in that. Basic minimum is provided, but more than that, there is some kind of a discrimination. And mostly the ICDS scheme, when you look at it from the beneficiary's perspective, this scheme is anchored to residence. And we know that in India, a large majority of people don't work in the place of their residence. They keep migrating, they go out and keep coming back. So for months together, there will be families that will be out of the ambit of ICDS because they have a card, but they still cannot come because they don't live in the place of where the card will work. So this anchoring to residence is one problem why many children in the crucial first 1,000 days of life lose out on ICDS for a long period. And also sometimes mothers also lose out. We have the midday meal program followed after ICDS. So this is also anchored to school. So if you are an out of school child or if you are migrant and going out of that school, you will miss out on the midday meal program. So we have many families where the girl children and other children are sent to labor work and they become out of school children. Girl child can be out of school because of lack of infrastructure, lack of toilet facility. There are many reasons why girls drop out. So they become out of school children and then they miss out on the midday meal. There are reports of caste and community based discrimination in serving food and seating children, which have come from many places, not just one or two states or one or two communities. From many places, there are continuous reports. If you follow newspapers, if you follow news reporting, you will know that there are many places from where there is community based or caste based discrimination in who will serve the food, who will cook the food, and all those things. Then there are poor quality food reported. This is something also not from a particular place or community or particular school. Across the ambit of midday meal, repeatedly we have found reports of some meal not being served or hot meal converted to cold meal. There is possibility of corruption and malpractice as parents hardly audit these services. So in many cases where the children of poor community go to the school, the parents have no control or no audit or no questioning to the school authority about the quality of food. So at times the quality of food that is actually given to children is very, very poor. Then there is the largest food grain distribution system, that is the public distribution system. I will not go into the detail of this program, the PDS system, but overall the PDS is a two-way system where it procures grain using a minimum support price from the farmers. Centrally it is stored and then distributes with a fair price shop system, uh, which is linked with the minimum support price. So the consumer subsidy which is provided through PDS, the subsidized grain that is provided to the poorest of the poor through PDS, is actually linked with the producer subsidy. Now there are some states which have stepped up and provided extra subsidy over what the centralized PDS produces. Tamil Nadu being one of the major example, how it subsidized the PDS grains. But because it's linked with overall in the central design, PDS is linked with producer subsidy, there are some problems. That is, it's the PDS price is not actually linked with the food market inflation. So it might, when there is a very high inflation and the food price sold, the MSP is very high, the consumer subsidy also comes down. The grains distributed have very low nutritional value. So it's rice and wheat. So there is also this huge debate on which Dr. Salome will throw some light when she talks about the FSN value chains. The grains distributed only rice and wheat is because the procurement is also heavily only on rice and wheat. So our entire production and distribution has been skewed towards a rice wheat based distribution system, which has had an impact on the nutritional value of PDS. And we know that in the program time and again there has been very high exclusion error and inclusion error. So now there is a talk of one nation, one card system. Unless this is implemented, PDS 2 is anchored to the residence. So if you are migrating out, you cannot come to your fair price shop. You cannot buy that quota that is allotted to your family. And there are other ways through which families lose out on PDS. Now it's an OTP based Aadhaar card linked service. So if there is a poor connectivity in cell phone, there is some kind of error, internet is not connected, then OTP will not be delivered and the family loses out on the PDS green. And if the OTP is not coming in the stipulated time when you're standing in the queue, there is no possibility for you to go back the other day and take the grain, because you do not take the grain on that particular window, the fair price shop will close, and whatever grain is left out, it will not get pooled in the next month's quota, it will get sold out in the open market. So this non-liquidity of PDS grain is one of the reason why people sometimes lose out on the PDS system. And if the biometric doesn't match, then also there is no backup option that you can buy it through other means or other channels. You just lose out on the grain. So although the system is very large and has been a very strong welfare net, very strong social protection system against hunger, but there are these internal problems in the PDS system which has till now has not been addressed very successfully. So there are other interventions. So midday meal, PDS and ICDS, they come under the umbrella of National Food Security Act. But other than these direct interventions that deal with hunger and malnutrition, there are other interventions which are not direct, but somehow in some pathway has an impact on malnutrition. So these indirect interventions can also be government led. For example, through this subcomponent of National Rural Livelihood Scheme, we have Mahila Kisan Sashактикаран Pariyojana (MKSP), which uses community mobilization and community-led organizations to enhance women's capability and skills in sustainable agriculture and provide them livelihood opportunities. Through this pathway of income and cash, they have an impact on overall nutrition, access to nutrition. And we have seen how access to land and cultivation or land and agriculture is important for women to access nutrition. So next we have National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, which is MGNREGA, which provide promises guaranteed livelihood for women, all the people, and women have a very high proportion in MGNREGA. Almost half the MGNREGA card holders and people who demand work in MGNREGA are women in India. So through again income pathway, it has an impact on women's nutrition and children's nutrition. And there are some CBO NGO-led interventions. For example, Deccan Development Society has its organic farming by women farmers. There is a forum called Action Against Malnutrition, which has different interventions under its umbrella. Especially in Rajasthan, they have done this program where they have mobilized community that women and the rest of the family, they eat together at the same time, so that women don't miss out on nutrition and different food items. So there are interventions other than this whole NFSA, the National Food Security Act umbrella. So we have been talking about how missing out on gender dynamics or missing out of intra-household dynamics has been one of the reasons why overall nutritional outcome has been missed out. So now then what should we do to design nutrition policies that will be informed of gender? What can we do as policymakers and program implementators? So there are some basic checklists that we can follow. First, these questions needs to be asked that have both women and men participated in policy formulation processes? At the formulation stage, was there any woman in the policy? Have those most at risk of food security, either chronic insecurity or seasonal or transitory, has these people been identified properly? Are people, this information of who is at the risk of food insecurity, has this information been disaggregated by sex? Have those most at risk of malnutrition, either acute or chronic energy and protein deficiencies, micronutrient deficiencies, diet-related chronic disease been identified? Is this information also disaggregated by age, sex and ethnicity and caste? Have the roles of men and women in food systems been analyzed? What are the kind of roles that a woman performs in food system? Where does she come into play? What are the kind of roles a man plays in the food systems? And is this analysis reflected in the formulation of the program? For example, if it is women who decide what kind of seed will be used, what kind of seed will be sown, and how much input will be used in the field, if they are the ones deciding this, if they are the ones doing this, then having a program related to seed targeted to men farmers or anchoring a farmer related program to only people who have land in their name will completely miss out on the actual people who should have been targeted. So this kind of understanding of the role of men and women in food systems have to be analyzed and brought into the policy formulation. Then have measures to address women's specific constraints. For example, increased time poverty, increased restrictions on their mobility. So there are some kind of constraints which are very specific to women itself. We will talk about it again tomorrow in detail, but we call it these are called strategic problems or strategic gender related problems. So these are not problems which both men and women will face. It's only for women because of social taboos or different societal restrictions. So women have very little leisure for themselves. Women have very huge restriction on where they can go and how they can move about. Have these restrictions been included in addressing the policy? And have gender sensitive indicators in monitoring and evaluation been included to measure the impact on both women and men beneficiaries? So these are some of the basic checklists that we can go through and we can think about to design nutrition policies informed of gender. So with this, I will end the first session of the day. This was an introduction to what we are going to discuss for the next 5